They put me 30 minutes, but I think I can do it in 5 because it's just really to show where things are going right now on the regional level and where the Skagit is fitting in, recovery is planning in on the Skagit to the regional recovery plan. So here's what's going on. Back in 2004, 2005, NOAA convened a biological review team that Nick mentioned. Gayetsky mentioned this was NOAA got together, looked at, in concern, there was a major reduction in steelhead in all rivers in the Puget Sound, including the Skagit. Skagit populations in the mid-'80s were around 14,000, 15,000. They dropped down to around 2,500. That was a good river. Places like the Nisqually, the Puyallup, dropped to just a handful of fish for those rivers, a couple hundred fish in some of those places. The NOAA looked at it. They ran through viability models. The term that Chuck Yeager used a lot for an airplane in a nosedive is that if you're in too steep, you don't pull out, you're going to auger in. That means, and then you buy the farm. Based upon the NOAA modeling for a large number of steelhead populations, they were predicting augering in, which means those populations were going to go extinct. Some of the populations of highest concern include the Nisqually, the Puyallup, the Green, and the list goes on. The Snohomish was doing not bad, but especially in the southern Puget Sound and some of the Hood Canal, but the southern Puget Sound populations were really nosediving. It was very alarming. And so because of that universal decrease, and because a number of the populations were projected to become extinct locally, steelhead were listed as a threatened species by NOAA in 2007. That was the same year that the biological review report was released by the NOAA scientists headed up by Jeff Hard and Jim Myers, George Pass, a number of other good people over at NOAA Fisheries. So once steelhead were listed in the Puget Sound because of, and to quote, because the populations in so many watersheds had declined to the point of imminent extinction, they were listed as threatened. They formed a recovery team, a recovery technical team. I was a part of that. That was convened in 2009. And there's 2 reports being released this year that are the result of that study, of that team. The first was just, both have been released as draft reports. And now one of them had just released as a final report just last month. It takes time to get these things through NOAA to official status. Those two reports are a population ID report, where the technical team identified all the, what we call demographically independent populations. That means it's a unique population based upon genetics, habitat structure, isolation from other watersheds, a number of other factors, and that identified, I think there's a total of 32 what we call DIPs, or demographically independent populations in the Puget Sound. The other report looked at the viability and looked at what needs to be done to restore the Puget Sound, not on the watershed level, but as a whole. And based upon genetics and geographical, geological, and risk factors, NOAA's TRT broke the Puget Sound into 3 regions. The Northern Cascade regions you can see here in green. This area called the Central Sound, Puget Sound. MPEG stands for Major Population Group, and that's the level at which NOAA operates. It really doesn't look at individual populations like the Skagit, but it's looking at how they all roll up together. And for recovery to occur in the Puget Sound, and then the third was the Hood Canal and Strait of Juan de Fuca, again based upon genetics, the threats in these areas, and then differences in geology and hydrology, to say the least. For recovery to occur, we need to get back all 3. So the problem is you have a nice place like the Skagit. It still isn't operating. 2,500 fish. We're still not being able to harvest fish. The river's been shut down for a long time now for fishing, and it's not performing like it used to. But it's still doing a lot better than most of the other places, especially the central Puget Sound. So that's where NOAA is right now in terms of what was done up to last year. After the TRT, which when I was on, sunsetted, the two reports are out, Puget, the population ID and the viability assessment. And Kurt's right, the Skagit has a very low risk of going extinct in the next 100 years. It tends to be stable, and it tends to have a lot of fish compared to other populations where you get sometimes a dozen fish per year. But the whole region is still in trouble, and the Skagit has to be brought back because it's the keystone. It's the major producer of fish. If you can't get the Skagit backed up, then the rest is going to be lost. Same thing for bull trout. So as of last year, as of last June, NOAA convened a new team under the Endangered Species Act. Once a species is listed, you have to develop a recovery plan to recover, in this case, the entire Puget Sound. And based upon the rules, all three of those major population groups need to be brought back, or else we don't get back to the recovery. So that team, as required by the Endangered Species Act, was convened last year for the first time, just barely 10 months ago. And the team selected different folks, and other people like myself volunteered on this, but this includes NOAA Fisheries, members of the Puget Sound Technical Recovery Team, which I was on, and then I've moved up into this. Puget Sound folks who are with the Puget Sound Partnership and Salmon Recovery Council, and then other members of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Convention, the co-managing tribes, and WDFW have all they have some folks who are now on this team too. And I'm just going to jump through this real quick. This is who's on there right now. We have a number of folks, including, it's being led by Elizabeth Babcock over in NOAA in Sandpoint. There's a consultant. We have Jeff Hart, who was the head of both the biological review team for Steelhead for NOAA, as well as the technical review team. And then various folks with both the tribes, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, Puget Sound Partnership, myself, and I got on because I was with the TRT. Long Live the Kings, Nooksack, and Nisqually Indian tribes are both part of this membership. And so what the objective is a regional recovery plan, basically looking at what are the major threats, what are the major issues in the Puget Sound, what sort of things, especially human factors, appear to be most limiting to steelhead. What are the things, what brought the steelhead populations down, and what can we do to get them back? So this is all being looked at in a very formal and, of course, bureaucratic way because it is NOAA. But this is just initiated. It's a very official thing because it's Endangered Species Act, it's required. And this is going to be going on for the next 2.5 years. It's not easy. There are a number of working groups that have been pulled together. The first is being headed up by Joe Anderson with WDFW, and they have just hired a postdoc, someone who just had his PhD in steelhead and population modeling, brought on to develop a life cycle model for the majority of the watersheds at the Puget Sound level, and then the folks in the small area into a model called EDT. I won't go much into it, but it fits a Ricker curve to 45 different variables. And there's some of us who, like John was saying, we don't think Ricker curves steelhead are pretty complex critters. So I'll just go aside. That is one group that's meeting. A life cycle model is being developed to look at recovery goals and scenarios, looking at what sort of goals need to be developed in the future. Another group, which I'm part of, is looking at stresses and pressures. That's really the limiting factors and threats. What sort of universal threats that most of the watersheds seem to be going under that have brought steelhead populations to the numbers they're at right now. Example in this group is hatcheries. Hatcheries are one of the universal limiting factors that are being, hatchery practices are being looked at, as well as habitat, changes in hydrology, hydroelectric facilities, and onward. And then there's a standard template that's being developed, really at this point by the Hood Canal, that is putting together a standard way of looking at steelhead recovery, and that can be shared and allow all the populations in the Puget Sound to basically look at everything in the same way. In the Chinook plan, it was all done independently, where all the population, every watershed did a different plan. And in fact, some cases, the things that were limiting Chinook were very much the same, such as a lack of juvenile rear, or scarcity of juvenile rearing habitat, but they all used different terminology to describe the same thing. So we had apples and oranges. This template is basically looking at a uniform process so that we can look at the watersheds and add it up to the MPEG or major population group level, and then those can be, it's very hierarchical, then look at the viability of the entire Puget Sound population as a whole. Then there's a long-term monitoring plan. Much of what Dave had said here on the Skagit is going to be implemented on the regional level. What's the timeline for this whole process is actually pretty dragged out. Right now, through January 2016, it's really just developing the tools needed to look at recovery planning and developing the recovery plan. So that's going to go through January 2016. Hopefully at that point, we'll have a life cycle model and some tools for looking at limitations and complexity and variability and VSP that John McMillan was talking about done by early January 2016. At the same time, we're going to try to have a uniform, or at least a set of uniform stresses, common stresses and pressures, basically human impacts that are most detrimental to steelhead in the Puget Sound identified. And there will be a common template for the watersheds to start implementing at that time. Through 2016 through 2017, they're going to be rolling this out for really public outreach, getting people like yourself involved in the project, looking at doing a review on the life cycle model. They're going to complete the stresses and pressures review, put it out then in late 2017 for public review, and of course an EIS, or if whatever is required. This would not require an EIS, but it's certainly going to be subject to public review so that the recovery plan would be completed by April 2018, and then I retire and go off and do other things. So that is, it's a long process. That's sort of the plan. It's really top down at this point. Chinook was bottom up. It was all done at the watershed basis. NOAA, because they're out of time, and they don't have really the time or resources they had in for Chinook in terms of funding for the watersheds to do this at the watershed level, it's really being done at the regional basis at this time. And there are 3 exceptions. I'll mention what those exceptions are. There are 3 watersheds in the Puget Sound that are currently developing, that have sufficient data and human resources and volunteers to really get this done and develop individual chapters. And those are the Nisqually, the Hood Canal, and last but not least, the Skagit. Thank God. So Steve Hinton, who's out here right now, is taking on the lead, which is a hard thing to do, but he's going to be leading the Skagit effort with the co-managers and bringing other folks like myself and Dave involved in that. There's the Nisqually is underway. They're doing their EDT thing, and then Hood Canal is already underway. But I'd have to say the Skagit is probably, because of the SK report that a number of the people worked here, is far ahead of the game. NOAA provided a major research grant through the late and great Bob Heyman got the grant from NOAA Fisheries that really developed a lot of the genetic understanding, the population analysis that was needed here. So the Skagit has the best data, has the best opportunity. So we'll just see what happens, but they're going to try and get a lead on this and maybe lead by example some of the other watersheds, but that's the current situation here. We're trying to get, NOAA intends to have this process completed in mid-2018. That's it. Any questions? Kurt?